They see him here.
They see him here.
And they see him here.
We know it because he said it.
Jesus said, "The world will see him when the world sees us."
That's why together we do this.
We give so that those who've not yet seen can see.
It means something when the world sees how we give.
It means something because we do not look the same.
It means something because we do not sound the same.
It means something because when we give, this is what the world sees.
They see the gospel doing what the world cannot.
They see the gospel making us one. And so we give.
We give so that missionaries can go.
We give so that churches can be started, hurts can be healed, and truth can be shared.
We give so the world might see Jesus in us.
United
as one.
It's hard to explain to somebody what it's like to live on the street if they never lived on the street. Most of the people out on the streets either have mental illness or they have an addiction. I just went over the edge. Ended up getting heavy into some drugs, and I lost my job. I became homeless. I was constantly heat exhaustion, alcohol poisoning. Like, I can literally say I was dying. Somehow my parents got a hold of Kay, and that's what opened up the door for me to become sober.
I met Yvonne, and she was homeless on the street, came to Friendship House, and things began to change in her life. Baptist Friendship House is a ministry center to folks that are impoverished, to folks that are unhoused, and to human trafficking survivors. We're able to provide them a meal. We're also able to meet those basic physical needs that others may have. It opens the door to minister to the spiritual needs so that a life-changing relationship can begin with Jesus Christ. We have a creative arts time, and usually that's pottery. They'll begin to open up and start sharing things during that time.
When you sit there and you have the clay in your hand, you know what you're going to be doing with it and what's going to become of it. But the clay doesn't know what it's going to have to go through to get to it.
Sometimes our lives are broken, and we're like just a big old lump of clay, and so lives can be molded and shaped by Jesus to be able to accomplish his perfect will. I have never seen a life change like Yvonne's, and it's just been amazing to watch God work in her life and then see how he's using her now in our ministry.
I never would have thought that I would be where I am today because I had no hope. This place saved my life.
When you give to Annie Armstrong, you help to make my ministry possible. Jesus never gives up on you, and so we should never give up on anybody else.
When people say keep Portland weird, you can think, oh, people there want nothing to do with God, nothing to do with the gospel. But there are so few evangelicals in the city that that curiosity is like you're this exotic creature.
Most people have never met a pastor before. And so you're definitely the minority if you are a Christian.
Gresham Bible Church was the first church I planted. We developed lots of deep, meaningful friendships with people in that community, and our kids did as well. But 3 years ago, the Lord made it clear to us that there were other communities in Portland that needed a new healthy church. This particular area of Northeast Portland is what you might call a church desert. And we were excited to follow the call of God, but worried about how our kids would take the news.
Yeah, I was not thrilled that we were moving. Like, one of the big things that we had been praying for when we moved here was that I could find some friends in this neighborhood, and I found a lot, so that's really nice.
We put ourselves out there in all kinds of ways with neighbors and with people who heard about this new church getting started, and it is all hands on deck for the Brown family in this church plant.
It's been a while since I went to church and just sat and listened instead of doing stuff during it, but it's nice to be able to help.
We've got to see people come to faith in Jesus Christ, grow. We've seen leaders raised up and missionaries sent out from our church because the need for gospel access in this city is really great.
We started this church believing the Lord would provide, and they've got to see, wow, God gave us a building, and God brought people, and sorry, it's gonna make me cry. They get a front row seat, to see the Lord provide, and it's been really awesome. Really awesome.
"2020 was a time that you can't forget. It was in the midst of the pandemic, and then George Floyd died. And we're in the Twin Cities, so it was like right here. We were meeting at the park, and so we would do these services, preach the gospel and serve our neighbors and give a picture of hope and unity where the gospel tears down these walls that separate us. Because there is a true melting pot in the Twin Cities. You have all these different languages and people groups within just even 5-10 miles. And so we planted the church, and the church is called All Peoples Church. And all peoples doesn't mean just ethnically, but it means generationally, it means socially. That was the heart of it. And being in the Twin Cities, being such a melting pot, it felt to me like that would be one of the most powerful apologetics to the world. The hardest thing is probably how slow life transformation takes. And so when people give, they give us church planters something that we really need, and that's time. Because life change is slow, especially if you're trying to plant a church where no foundation is laid, as Paul says in the end of Romans. It's slow work. And yet there is no shortage of people who've joined our church, and they're growing in their faith for the first time. And that's what's been going on. Someone encounters Jesus, and then they go tell people, come and see. And so after doing that for a handful of years in the Twin Cities, the world can look and see and say, wow, Jesus is real. And I love that.
Alaska is cold. Alaska has dark winters, and never in a million years did I think that I would be in a church planting role. But we arrived in Alaska early 2019 to take the helm at True North. We think about the strain it puts on planters to move their family here, to endure the darkness, to live in the cold. In the same way that it's hard for people to move here, to live here, it's really challenging for churches to thrive here. I got a taste of that the first time that I met Russ Mabry. Russ was the last and youngest deacon at Muldoon Road Baptist Church at 82 years old.
The last few years, we've had declining population. We did not have the funds to bring a pastor up in lieu of a call or to move him and his family up here. The only viable option that I saw was the potential of merger.
He explained to me that Muldoon Road, though it had been thriving in its history, the baton was never passed. And Muldoon Road and True North were different really in every way. But we decided to become one church and to begin to pass that baton and really bring up the next generation of faithful believers. We are a healthier, more mature, but also more agile, lively, and ready to go church than either of those previous churches could have been on their own. God's always brought young men to us. I sort of think it's the rugged wilderness of Alaska. We need to find pockets of darkness in our city and in our state where there is no gospel light, train those young men, get behind them with resources, and then send them to do the work of the church. Without the generous giving of Southern Baptists, church plants can't survive. We need the faithful partnership of Southern Baptists in the lower 48 states. I never want to undersell that this is a hard place. But this is what passing the baton looks like. It looks like an older generation being willing to trust that the next generation of the church will carry the light of the gospel to the people who need it.
There is nowhere on earth quite like Ridgewood. Ridgewood is a neighborhood that really, I think, holds the heartbeat of the city. You had Albanians, Polish, Nepali, Egyptians, and you have Romanians. I served a Romanian church in Romania. When we got the call to move here, this church was in trouble. This church was planted some 25 years ago, and it was planted out of a genuine desire to reach out to Romanians for Christ. But as time progressed, Romanians would not come here as much from their home country. Once that's not happening anymore, then you're most likely going to close that church. I started praying and asking the Lord for a vision. And as I was praying, the gospel came in full focus. The gospel is for everybody. And we are in the midst of all nations. So in 2019, we restarted as an entirely new church for all nations. So we started serving our neighborhood. We started a food pantry and served 300 plus people every week. And as soon as we restarted, people started showing up to church. The church now is really a sample of the neighborhood. We live in a day and age where people are separated by their races, ethnicities, but God has taken this church and made it something new. And I'm telling you, it's just, every time I step into this church, I'm just blown away to see all these people from the neighborhood, our neighbors, coming in and just joyfully worshiping. It's just a thing to see.
For most of our Oglala people, summertime is known as the white van season. It's where white vans would show up and do a lot of great things, and then the white vans would leave. 12 years ago, I came here on a white van, and just the imprint that the church has of coming and then leaving. I believe the Lord put that in my heart to begin the call for us to come live here for however long He needed us. We are in the southwest corner of South Dakota on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. Pine Ridge is home to the Oglala Lakota people, and we lead the country in everything you don't want to lead the country in. We have 80% unemployment. The teen suicide rate is 300% higher than the national average, and we're still ultimately an unreached people group here in the center of our country. We are absolutely an evangelistic ministry, but our approach is through compassion ministry. We do a free summer camp for our local kids. It's a day camp. We have church groups that help us do camps for typically 8 weeks out of the summer. And then one of the greatest needs we have here is just basic housing needs, water lines, plumbing, electrical, and I've always done construction. You build relationships that way, so it became a pretty big staple for our ministry was just construction outreach. And then the journey of becoming a licensed dental practice. And through all of that, God has blessed us with some amazing churches and teams that have come from all over the country from day one and have helped us do this. And so to make the gospel accessible, our heart was to be consistent, to be here, to be present all year long. And so people here still call it the white van season, but now it's different.
Newfoundland is called the Rock because life here is hard. We're an island off the east coast of Canada, and from a spiritual perspective, it's mind-boggling how little churches there are. You know, my parents are from Newfoundland, my whole heritage is from here, and so we moved back to Newfoundland because it's a fantastic place to plant a church.
When I first came to Newfoundland, I remember sitting on my couch praying and just feeling so sad that people that I didn't even know, I hadn't even met them yet, but they had no chance to hear the gospel.
We are here in Kilbride, and there's a lot of young families here. And in 1892, the last church existed in Kilbride. It burnt down in 1892. And so the gospel hasn't been preached here in 128 years. And so we set out to have people in our home because there's a term called CFA, come from away. If you're born on the mainland or anywhere else but Newfoundland and you move here, you will always be known as a come from away.
So we had to adjust our mindset and say, we are moving to Newfoundland and we are going to let God work. We know that that's probably going to be a long process.
We are seeing the gospel transforming people. But still, when we are gathering on Sundays, I'm always reminded of how outnumbered we are. If I were to get in a car and drive 2 hours south, you won't find a single Bible-preaching, gospel-centered evangelical church. And so it's the Rock, because it's very hard to plant seeds here. But Lord, here I am, send me.
La lucha libre es un deporte que en México es parte de nuestra cultura, es parte de nuestra historia, es parte de lo que nos da identidad. Y esto me quería dedicar toda mi vida. Pero ahora yo cambié. Comenzamos a preguntar en dónde era un lugar donde no había mucho para compartir el evangelio en español. Entonces, saber en dónde era necesario tener una plantación en donde no hubiera mucho para ayudar a los hispanos, un lugar que podríamos decir estaba limpio acerca del evangelio, que tenía una necesidad muy grande. Entonces fue como decidimos tomar el reto y tomar el llamado de poder estar aquí en Lincoln, Nebraska.
Mi corazón se entristece. Aquí estamos solos, pero al mismo tiempo mi corazón se alegra y mi corazón está regocijado porque le sirvo a mi Dios.
El nombre de la iglesia es Iglesia Bíblica Cosecha. Y la clave, relaciones personales. Así que compartimos entrenamiento de fútbol, soccer, que es algo muy clásico en nuestra cultura, y a través de un entrenamiento, activación física, compartimos con la comunidad y usamos esa conexión para dar el mensaje de salvación. Y nuestra fiesta piñatas, hacemos lo mismo que en el soccer camp, pero cambiamos un balón por piñatas. Y es así como comenzamos la iglesia, haciendo conexiones con la comunidad de una manera intencional. Y hoy día el resultado es que nosotros crecer como iglesia, estamos trabajando en nuestra segunda locación en la ciudad, y lo único que necesitamos es quien nos apoye y nos respalde para nosotros poder seguir al frente. Así que te invitamos a que puedas compartir, porque somos todos trabajando codo a codo en beneficio del reino.